Hey y'all, this is Pastor Brian from Haymarket Church. It is Thursday, the 9th of January, 2025, continuing to move into the new year. And this is our weekly midweek video, talking about faith, life, what's going on in the world. Today we're just doing a Bible study. I'm going to be honest with you, I had to record this a little bit in advance. And so Bible studies are a good way to not worry about trying to talk about what's going on in the world and like missing something that happened. And so this is a video. We're going to read scripture, but that scripture is actually deeply relevant to our world. It is so this last Sunday was we celebrated Epiphany at Haymarket Church. Epiphany is celebrated on the 6th of January every year. It is the end of the Christmas season. We've talked about that numerous times in these videos, and we are going to read that story and we're going to tell it. And I'm excited to tell the story of Epiphany and see what it has to say to us. So this is the Gospel according to St. Matthew, is the traditional Gospel reading for Epiphany. Chapter 2, we're just going to read all of chapter 2 because, let's go for it. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in the territory of Judea during the rule of King Herod, Magi, also translated as wise men in some traditions, or in some translations, Magi came from the east to Jerusalem. They asked, "Where is the newborn king of the Jews? We've seen his star in the east and we've come to honor him." When King Herod heard this, he was troubled, and everyone in Jerusalem was troubled with him. He gathered all the chief priests and the legal experts and asked them where the Christ was to be born. They said, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for this is what the prophet wrote. You, Bethlehem, land of Judah, by no means are you least among the rulers of Judah, because from you will come one who governs, who will shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod secretly called for the Magi and found out from them the time when the star had first appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search carefully for the child. When you found him, report to me so that I too may go and honor him." When they heard the king, they went, and look, the star they had seen in the east went ahead of them until it stood over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were filled with joy. They entered the house and saw the child with Mary, his mother. Falling to their knees, they honored him. Then they opened their treasure chests and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Because they were warned in a dream not to return to Herod, then they went back to their own country by another route. When the Magi had departed, an angel from the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod will soon search for the child in order to kill him." Joseph got up and during the night took the child and his mother to Egypt. He stayed there until Herod died. This fulfilled what the Lord had spoken through the prophet, "I have called my son out of Egypt." When Herod knew the Magi had fooled him, he grew very angry. He sent soldiers to kill all the children in Bethlehem and all the surrounding territory who were 2 years old and younger, according to the time that he had learned from the Magi. This fulfilled the words spoken through Jeremiah the prophet. A voice was heard in Ramah, weeping and much grieving, Rachel weeping for her children, and she did not want to be comforted, because they were no more. After King Herod died, an angel from the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt. "Get up," the angel said, "and take the child and his mother and go to the land of Israel. Those who were trying to kill the child are dead." Joseph got up, took the child and his mother, and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus ruled over Judea in place of his father Herod, Joseph was afraid to go there. Having been warned in a dream, he went to the area of Galilee. He settled in a city called Nazareth, so that what has been spoken through the prophets might be fulfilled. He will be called a Nazarene. So this is a critical scripture. There's a lot of things going on here that are worth mentioning. I will certainly not be able to hit them all because it's so dense. This is the story that we tell of the Magi, the wise men. Magi is a better translation, like magician kind of thing. These are astrologers coming to visit Jesus. I remember we mentioned this, I think, a couple weeks ago in the video. This isn't like right after Jesus is born. This is not like laying in the manger. Like based on the age that we hear of the children that Herod kills, and we'll get to that, Jesus may be somewhere about 2 years old. So these people are on this long trip to come see him. They come and see him, and they're seeking the king, right? And so what's interesting is Matthew is very Jesus between birth and death in the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus is very focused on what he calls the lost sheep of the children of Israel. His mission is a mission that is focused on his people, the Jewish people. Jesus is Jewish. All his disciples are Jewish. It's focused on them. He even has like moments when he resists reaching out to non-Jewish folks, which is reasonable because the Gentiles, the non-Jewish folks in his land, were oppressors. They were people who were doing violence to his people. And he does interact with folks, but it's clear that his focus is on his own people, on Jewish folks. But Matthew frames his gospel. So that's how Matthew tells the story. Jesus is very focused on the children of Israel, his own people. But Matthew frames the story with foreigners. At the death of Jesus, the person who recognizes him, that he is Lord, is a Roman centurion, that he is the Son of God. And he sends Jesus then after the resurrection, when he meets the disciples on the mountaintop, he says, go into all the world, making disciples of all nations, right? Making disciples of all people. So the mission becomes universal to all people. And the story starts, the first people to worship Jesus are these foreigners, right? The Magi are not, like, they're from far away. They practice a different religion. They probably worshiped gods other than the God of Israel. So they're idolaters, according to biblical understanding, right? They don't worship the true God, and yet they figure out who Jesus is. And so Matthew is, from start to finish, telling a story about Jesus is a very particularly Jewish Messiah, right? The idea of the Messiah or the Christ is a Jewish idea. He is fully and deeply entrenched in his people's story. And that story opens up at the beginning and the end, which means for us, reading the story, for us, it opens up to all people, right? This is a story of, and that's part of the big story the New Testament tells, is that Jesus somehow unites the two branches of humanity according to a biblical understanding, Jew and Gentile, Jewish folk and non-Jewish folk. Jesus is the way that Gentile folks like me get welcomed in to worship and to become part of the people of the God of Israel. This is huge. This is revolutionary. So from the beginning, outsiders are getting it, right? These are, would have been probably despised people who, were kind of the wrong religion from the wrong place. So outsiders are welcomed in. And that aligns up with something else that goes in here that I just think it's really important for us to recognize. This is the passage where we get the idea that Jesus was a refugee, which is really important for Christians thinking about immigration and refugees in our own context. Jesus was one. And again, I said this in my sermon on Sunday, like, I think it would be fair to call him an undocumented immigrant, because it's not like Joseph went through the proper channels to run to Egypt. When you hear the political authorities are trying to kill you and your wife and your son, you don't say like, hey, let me fill out some paperwork. You say, let me get out of here. Let me try to keep them safe, right? And so this is where we get so outsiders, folks, Jesus becomes an outsider. Right? These are outsiders from a foreign land who come to worship Jesus, and then pretty much immediately, Jesus and his family go to a foreign land in a quest for safety. And so Jesus is worshipped by outsiders, and he becomes an outsider. He becomes one of the excluded, someone who's on the run for his life. That's who Jesus is. In this story. And so that's why we say things like Jesus was a refugee, and when you welcome a refugee, you're welcoming Jesus. We get that from the story. We also get it from like Old Testament commands to welcome immigrants, which the Old Testament is very clear and forceful about. But this is another moment where the kind of the circle is drawn wider and more people are included, which is kind of the whole trajectory of the Bible. God continually welcomes outsiders, welcomes more people, includes more and more people in God's story. So this is a big deal, right? And this is in response to this violence. So the Magi, there's a newborn king. We've seen the signs of him in the stars, right? They're astrologers, so they're watching the stars for hints that God is at work, or hints of what's happening in the world, right? This is like the astrology page in the newspaper. Do people still read the newspaper? Does it still have astrology pages? It did when I was a kid. It was really weird. I always found it very strange. So they're watching the signs, and they say, "Oh, a new king has been born in Judea." Well, they go to where the kings in Judea lived, in Bethlehem. Herod was a client king. This is not the same Herod who puts Jesus to death at the end of his life. That's this Herod's son, Herod the Tetrarch meaning 4 rulers. This Herod died. Herod the Great, he was called himself the Great. He was what was great about, I guess what was unique about him, he killed a lot of people, including his own family members, to hold on to power. This Herod the Great is the one who's ruling when Jesus is born, was awful. It's how it tends to work in history, by the way. Like lots of times when like emperors and rulers are called the Great, it means they were really great at killing, but that's also another story for another day. Herod the Great, he was murderous. Again, he killed members of his own family in order to hold on to power. And his son Herod, the Tetrarch, will be part of Jesus getting killed. But Herod, they go to the palace where Herod is. Herod's a client king of Rome, so Rome's really in charge, but they say it's easier than having like ruling everything as a Roman controlled province to have some places that are like client kingdoms. And it's like, listen, you give us some money, you pay us money, and we'll let you technically be the king and be in charge. So they ally with the local elites or like some like secondary elites who they raise up to the top, right? And say like, you get to be in charge, you do your thing, you give us money, you submit to us, you give us what we want. And so Rome's really in charge. Herod can't do too much, but is the king who works for Rome. And so he, kills people to hold on to that power. And so they go to the palace and say, hey, a new king's born. And Herod's like, oh no, please tell me where he is so I can worship him. Not his intention. His intention is, tell me where he is so I can kill him, right? And we see that. We get so mad when they don't come back. He goes and he murders all the children in the town, which would have been like 10 to 20. Bethlehem's a small town, children under the age of 2. We're not talking about thousands of people. We're talking about, a dozen. But that is a tragedy, right? There's a great command in, I think it's in Midrash, which is a kind of Jewish commentary on scripture that has its own kind of holy status. Maybe it's in the Talmud. It's in one of those where the rabbis who wrote it, the teachers who wrote these, kind of made a prohibition against counting people. And it wasn't that you literally couldn't count people, but it's why like things like the census that David does in the Old Testament, God gets mad about. Their idea is that it's wrong to count people because everyone is of infinite value, because everyone reflects the image of God. We are made in the image of God, therefore we have infinite value. Therefore, like if you say, well, only 3 people died, right? That's 3 times infinite value. It's infinite. No matter, every time someone dies, it is an infinite loss because we are all of infinite value because we are created in the image of the God who is everything, who is measureless in terms of God's value. So however many children died, this is horrific. This is a tragedy. Right. And so we see at the beginning of Jesus' story, the violence that will haunt him his whole life, the lengths to which people will go to hold on to power, the reason we need Jesus. Look, a king to hold on to power is willing to kill babies, right? The politically powerful now, it's not always that crass, although it is in certain parts of the world. But the things that the powerful are willing to destroy to hold on to their own power, right? Tearing down, institutions or whatever, to get their way, seeking to undermine things that are good to get their way, willingness to harm real people for spite or for vengeance or for their own control or power. Like these things still happen. And Jesus shows up amongst those who are harmed. Jesus shows up amongst those who have violence done to them. And he runs away. And by the way, like running away from targeted violence is okay. It is good. Right? It is good to flee to safety. But we see Jesus with those who are targeted, those who are marginalized. And so this is a story about unjust political power and God seeking to undermine it in subtle ways, in ways that are maybe surprising. Like God faces down violence in the person of Jesus Christ. God resists injustice and hatred and evil. God is at work for good. That's what we're talking about here. So may we encounter this story and wrestle with the real difficulties of unjust power. May we be on the side of those who were persecuted, not on the side of the powerful persecutor like Herod. May we recognize that Jesus enters into our world for the outsiders and with the refugees and the immigrants. May we know that this story we tell about God showing up isn't all sunshines and rainbows. It's also challenge and hurt. God shows up in the hurt. God shows up in the brokenness. God shows up with and for and recognized by outsiders. God shows up. That's the story of Epiphany. God shows up. Light shines in the darkness. And even the worst darkness, the darkness of violence and hatred and brutality that we see in Herod, even that darkness cannot overcome God's light and love. That's the good news. May it be a witness to you as we move past Epiphany. Peace.